I think now people they want a single answer rather than a set of choices that they can scroll through. And I think where the LLMs have come in is they've offered that clarity, that single sort of source of information.
I mean, it's a good thing for brands that have always invested in PR because they believe it's great for adding credibility to their organisation. Is this a kind of second payoff now in terms of the earned coverage that they're receiving?
Owning the conversation doesn't necessarily mean owning every conversation.
Yeah. The very, very early adopters could probably gain traction through optimizing for machines, but I think then the machines change and they learn that people don't want to read rubbish that's been churned out by AI to tick multiple boxes. They want to read unique content that is aimed at their area of interest.
The integrated aspect, sometimes people have worked integrated in name but maybe not in spirit, and I think that's probably where it might need to change.
Yeah, there's no hiding from it now. You've got to do it, haven't you? Yeah. Hello and welcome to What's Got the World Talking. In this episode, what's got us chatting is Generative Engine Optimisation, GEO, and how AI-powered search is reshaping brand discovery. Search is no longer just about rankings and clicks. Audiences have swiftly embraced the comprehensive, nuanced answers delivered by AI-powered search in place of those old lists of blue links, and it's changing everything from visibility to content strategy. So after years of refining search strategies, optimizing for keywords and climbing rankings, what should brand marketers be doing now? What determines whether your brand appears in an AI-generated answer? Has SEO fundamentally changed? And if so, in what ways? And why are authority, credibility and earned media suddenly becoming some of the most valuable assets in a marketer's toolkit? I'm joined by Associate Director Rob Jones and Senior Content Director Tom Went to explore what has changed, why it matters, how PR, content and SEO fit into the new ecosystem, and where we're heading. So hello, welcome back. I think podcast regulars now. Do you want to start by introducing yourselves?
So I'm Tom, Senior Content Director at WPR. So very much in the sort of content space, GEO. So looking forward to that discussion.
I'm Rob, Associate Director here at WPR. My third time on the podcast, so yeah.
You must be good. We keep inviting you back.
Hopefully, yeah. Like to think so.
So today we're here to discuss all things GEO. Obviously, everyone is talking about GEO, AI and search engines. Let's sort of set the scene by explaining what GEO actually is.
I'll go first. I think in basic terms, it's a strategy to rank on the LLMs effectively. So making sure that your brand is present and mentioned, cited, or even named as a source for the queries that people are now searching on these bots.
Beautiful explanation.
And when we're talking about sort of GEO, we're referring to platforms like Google in terms of its AI functionality, but probably not new anymore, but kind of
newer,
developing, emerging platforms, Claude, Perplexity, ChatGPT is sort of the household name at the moment. So the sort of chatbots that people know them as.
Yeah. So how has it changed in terms of how people search for brands or just search online?
I think we're all seeing it, aren't we, in our daily lives, almost without realising it. I think search has become a lot more conversational, a lot more specific. I think people are, and we see this across numerous different channels, platforms, about how time poor people are, and how impatient people are. I think now people they want a single answer rather than a set of choices that they can scroll through. And I think where the LLMs have come in is they've offered that clarity, that single sort of source of information, sometimes recommending a brand rather than a sort of infinite number of search results that people can scroll through. And I think that in itself has sort of resulted from the fact that search is more conversational, sometimes longer tail, less reliance on keywords, more reliance on very specific questions and queries.
Yeah, I think, as Rob said, it's changed from a keyword-based approach really to a sort of longer tail question-based search behavior. So the way the technology interfaces with people now is much different than it was before. I think we treat these bots in a much different way than we do to Google. And obviously, in terms of what we do, we need to obviously respond in kind, make sure that content's answering those questions, not just in terms of like keyword relevance, but also in terms of like authority and relevance for the brand that we're trying to produce content for.
Have we got any insights and data on just how seismic this shift has been in consumer or people's behaviour?
I think the biggest impact we've probably seen is the introduction of Google AI overviews. So I think traditional organic traffic has dipped significantly in the sort of time that's been introduced. I think we've seen 30% dips, is it? Possibly even more?
It varies, doesn't it? But I think there's this zero-click sort of term that's not necessarily crept in. I think stormed to the party, and we're seeing now people are not necessarily needing to visit a brand's website to get the answer that they're looking for. And for brands, it's created a real challenge because it's kind of like it now suddenly becomes the interaction that you potentially have with a user, a prospect, a customer becomes much less reliant on channels you can control.
And are there any kind of demographic insights in terms of which audience types are more likely to use Claude versus ChatGPT versus sticking to Google because they know it and like it?
I think originally we were seeing this, it's like a lot of sort of emerging channels. We see the younger generation, the sort of Gen Z, millennial audiences potentially being those early adopters, but it's not, from what we're seeing now, and partly due to the way that AI has now become baked into the likes of Google.
Yeah.
This isn't a young person's thing as such. This is just, whether people realize it or not, most of us now are using an AI search mechanic of some description. So I think there's a bit of maybe a generalization sometimes when people almost assume and apply this connotation that, that's just for the kids, the graduates, the sort of university students that are using AI now. Not the case at all. It's being applied to pretty much every industry that we work across and every market that those industries serve as well.
Yeah, it's good to keep in mind as well, though, that those search behaviors probably have changed substantially, but there's also a great deal of people that are still using the traditional organic Google search or another search engine. So while the change has been profound, I think it's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as it were. We shouldn't have this wholesale shift towards this way of creating content and this way of searching. So it's just something to bear.
Well, I think it depends what you've gone online to do. If you've gone online to find the answer to a question, just do some research, I think you go to the AI tools first. But if you've gone to buy something, you still need to go onto the website ultimately, don't you? So probably a little bit of both. And what's your search tool of choice these days?
I'm still, Google is still my main search tool, but I think increasingly day to day in work, I do use more of a bot, so Copilot here at WPR. But I think eventually that will probably change to
I'm very similar, actually. Yeah, still Google. It's a weird thing. Outside of work, it'll always be Google. Inside of work, we're a Microsoft business, aren't we? So Copilot's sort of baked into a lot of the programs that we use. So it becomes almost second nature, I think. So for me, But again, think about the technologies that these bots and these platforms are built on. Even Copilot sort of uses a ChatGPT or the OpenAI sort of product in its background. So in a sense, using the same data, if you like, the same source information, but through a different interface.
I was going to say, for the purposes of this conversation as well, obviously for our GEO service, we're looking at all of the platforms, so not just Copilot, of course. So I suppose personally, I'm using Copilot, but in a sort of work capacity for clients, I'm looking at all of them.
Probably
really.
Rare you've got two people sat on a sofa, neither of which go to ChatGPT first.
Yeah.
Well, Claude seems to be one that people are talking about most at the moment. What are the advantages of Claude over the other?
So I think the assumption is Claude has the most powerful model at the moment. So I think in terms of the quality of the outputs, it's that much greater than what has typically been Copilot as the most popular chatbot. But it's interesting in talking to clients that have offices and markets overseas, Claude is a lot more popular in America than apparently ChatGPT is. Obviously, the assumption would be that ChatGPT is the most popular, but not the case apparently.
Oh, I didn't know that. Learn something new every day, and that's what I've learned today. So it's clearly a rapidly evolving space. So from a marketer's perspective, how much do we actually know about how best harness GEO for a brand right now?
I think the assumption is that good SEO still reinforces a lot of what we need to do with GEO. But I think the intention behind the searches is something that's changed quite substantially. So moving from a keyword-based way of searching to a longer tail question conversational format, as Rob mentioned earlier, the way you create content in response to that has changed quite substantially. So it's more about understanding the searcher's intentions and their follow-up intentions as well, and not necessarily just optimizing content for a particular keyword or a phrase.
I think it's been really interesting to see kind of how this sort of space has developed, because there's almost an irony baked into the conversations that we're having, which is people are now using AI a lot more to find information. But as a result of that, I think the AI algorithms have evolved to the point where they're rewarding that kind of human-centric, trustworthy quality of content that AI potentially can't deliver. So on one hand, you've got, I know we've spoken about this in a previous episode where we spoke about the use of AI and the potential pitfalls in using AI to generate content. And the irony is, in terms of AI search, the rewards are really there for the brands that don't just delegate their content to an AI model and actually invest in human-centric content, case studies, interviews, testimonials, opinions, insights, proprietary data, all of those things that really build trust and credibility are being rewarded no end through the LLMs as well.
So it probably brings us really nicely on to the next question, is what are brands getting right and wrong in relation to GEO at the moment that you're seeing across the board?
So I think one of the big challenges at the moment, and it's very indicative, I suppose, or evocative of the early year of SEO, where companies are now producing like best of lists or comparison lists in the same way that companies used to keyword stuff their websites in order to rank quickly for certain terms or topics. Yeah. So that seems to be an approach at the moment, but I don't think it's going to last for long, because as we've seen with Google over the years, the interfaces behind these, or the systems behind these search consoles have got more sophisticated, and they sort of block out these quick win tactics, I suppose. So in terms of what people are getting wrong at the moment, I think that's probably a strategy that's doomed to fail, and they should focus more on content that will answer people's questions and intentions satisfactorily, and obviously making sure that that's up to date over time.
I think the other thing that we see a little bit, and it's forgivable because I think this is all it's a rapidly developing space that, you know, it's difficult to stay on top of this stuff. But I think one of the things that maybe brands are getting wrong as well is sort of not breaking down that silo between owned channels and earned media as well. So I think we've seen and read a lot about, and the evidence all proves it, this concept of corroboration, i.e., the algorithms pick up information that they can see your brand associated with across multiple channels. So it could be that you've got a particular product, you've got content on your own website, but also you've got thought leadership around that product category within the trade press, for example. All of that kind of ecosystem works together to really kind of bring results. So I think, again, completely forgivable, but those brands, much like we've seen with sort of SEO and PR over the years, there's sometimes a gap. The brands that really succeed are the ones that close that gap.
It's a massive challenge for brands, because they've invested so much money, tens, hundreds of thousands, millions over the years in getting their websites beautifully optimized, the backlinks rolling in, it's all lovely. Then something just comes along and says, well, that model's in the bin. You've almost got to start from scratch. Is it starting from scratch?
I'd say it's not really in some respects, because the way a website's structured, the schema, that's very important to your chances of being cited or sort of, retrieved, I suppose, in one of these bots. So no, I think good SEO principles still reinforce GEO success, really. So
I think sometimes, we've mentioned that kind of credibility factor. We've run audits, haven't we, for brands sort of looking to enhance their AI visibility. And sometimes it's just been a case of, the recommendation would be you take that product category page and you add in more trust signals that the algorithms will pick up and sort of value. So it's not to say that all of the hard work of years gone by is lost, but I think sometimes it's enhancing that and bringing in kind of new, might be new functionality. It might just be a bit more information around a product or around a service, or again, keep coming back to it. That kind of evidence and proof has become really, really important as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily starting from scratch. I suppose it's more thinking about all of the points in between now. So companies may have before only thought about search in search terms, but with GEO, we now need to start thinking about authority and relevance and how the brand, I guess, is perceived by these machines. So that obviously brings in lots of different teams that wouldn't necessarily be or traditionally be part of the search function. So I guess that's where some might be starting from scratch.
True. A question I'm often asked by clients is how important to backlinks still these days.
I would say it's still pretty important, right?
Yeah, from what we understand, they're still important. Not the be all and end all as people may have sort of bought into over previous years, but still a massive signifier of trust to search algorithms that we're still relying on today. Again, I think we've always sort of been maintaining that view, and we've seen it within analytics for the brands that we work with. The links don't necessarily prove to be a really strong referrer of traffic to a website anyway, but what they do is offer that signifier of this is a trustworthy source of information, and that still stands today in the kind of AI search landscape as well.
I think to me it's a good thing for brands that have always invested in PR because they believe it's great for, I think, credibility to their organisation. Is this a kind of second payoff now in terms of the earned coverage that they're receiving?
I think so. Yeah, I think we all got
slightly biased, but
we're very biased. I think we all got very excited, didn't we? Maybe sort of back end of last year, there was a lot of sort of data that was coming out of the likes of SEMrush, brilliant data and brilliant research that was being brought to prominence around the most common sort of citation sources, the websites that are being cited the most frequently. And you start to see the takeaway was earned media is where you really need to invest, because that's where those trust signals that the algorithms are looking for really come through. So it's no surprise we've seen the likes of Reddit, LinkedIn, YouTube. They're among the top websites in terms of citations. And what do they all have in common? They're all largely centered around human-generated, user-generated content. So that authenticity is really what the algorithms are looking for.
So how should brands tweak or overhaul, transform, I don't know, their PR strategy with LLMs in mind?
I think it's perhaps, again, go back to a point that we mentioned earlier on. It's about seeing earned media as part of an ecosystem, a really important part of an ecosystem, but looking at how you can generate content that can be deployed across multiple channels, even social. So particularly in the B2B space, we see now, that thought leadership campaign that we might have just looked at getting coverage for in some quality trade media outlets. It's really important that that same viewpoint, that same sort of school of thought is deployed across LinkedIn as well, purely because of how prominent that is as a citation source. So I think in terms of the strategies, those that have sort of had really effective PR strategies and were invested in it before probably don't need to massively overhaul what they were already doing. But I think there's a real thought that needs to go into how that single message can be deployed across multiple channels, encompassing own channels as well as earned.
Yeah, we talk a lot in consumer social about sweating the assets.
Yes.
You can produce a piece of content, but TikTok, it works well for Reels, etc. And I think that's how brands need to look at all the content they're producing now.
Yeah, and it's that corroboration point we mentioned earlier, isn't it?
I was just going to say, I think in terms of like the tactics, I suppose, is making sure that those messages are consistent across all platforms. But that's not just the brand. It could be a spokesperson as well. So if you're doing some thought leadership on LinkedIn and also in the press, you need to make sure that it's the same author, the same points being raised, and the same date of publication, because these things are all feeding into the sense that this company knows what they're talking about. This person is an authority.
I didn't know it went down to such minutiae.
That's a really good
point. I say minutiae, it might not be minutiae, but I didn't know that.
No, it is. It's a really good point as well, actually, around the timeliness of it, because I think we're seeing now as well data that shows us that it's the more recent content that's being published, that's being picked up and sort of rewarded, if you like, within the generative AI answers. And I think, maybe for those brands that would have worked on a campaign by campaign basis. So if you were, a seasonal sort of brand with very seasonal sales cycles, for example, maybe worth thinking about activity you can do to sort of bridge those gaps between campaigns, because that recency's become a really important factor as well.
I was going to say, it's almost even more important now to be able to recognize news opportunities and be able to insert your brand into that conversation, because those periods between the stories that you really own and the ones that you may be able to contribute to are what will make the difference in terms of visibility long term, I think. So particularly with the recency bias, as Rob mentioned.
Yeah.
I forget the figure now, which I'm kicking myself for, but something like 70% of citations are from the last 12 months, We're all going to kick ourselves now, aren't we?
There's a lot of data.
Put it in the comment.
There is a lot of data around that. And I think the trouble with GEO generally, so just to sort of broaden the net, I guess, things are moving very quickly. And the assumptions that people made to begin with, when this became a sort of new discipline, I suppose, or even if it is a new discipline, that's another conversation. The picture's changed substantially in that period. So what we're saying now may actually change in the future. I guess that's obviously just a caveat for us as well.
And you'll come back when we need to do another one.
Yeah, there's absolutely
next week we'll do another one. Yeah. It's all relative to industry, isn't it? So I think again we talk about recency, but recency is all relative. If you're in a really highly competitive market where there's tens of brands all competing in the same product category, that recency is really going to matter a lot. If you're in a really niche specialist B2B sector, for example, not to say it's not important, but you perhaps don't need to worry quite so much about the investing in recency as maybe some of those faster moving product categories might.
But I think what it does say is across the board, you can't just say, right, AI search is here, LLMs are really important, so we're going to do a PR campaign. It doesn't work like that, does it? No. You can have campaigns with spikes of activity, but you've got to underpin that with always on and activity.
And to be completely transparent, when we first started looking at this as a service we felt we could offer, I think we were maybe a bit guilty of going, well, brilliant, all the site, the sort of common citation sources, the websites that are being really pulled through to the AI answers, they're earned media. That's great for PR. And then you do some testing and you start seeing, well, in certain categories, actually, it's not earned media that's driving the results at all. It's owned. It's the client's own website, for example. So getting that mix is really important. And I think to think that, or to assume it's one or it's the other, is a really dangerous pitfall to fall into, particularly because of how fast moving this space is. It could all change. And I think you've got that to an extent. This isn't the most strategic comment you'll ever hear on this podcast, but there is a degree of hedging bets that I think needs to take place within the GEO arena as well.
Yeah, well, much like LLMs themselves, we're all just still learning, and we're not going to stop learning for a very long time to come.
And I think that's the thing. There's obviously a bit of a short-sightedness about treating it as a campaign. It's you shouldn't really treat these things as a campaign because they're an evergreen aspect of your brand, right? Visibility and relevance and authority aren't really things that you can engineer over a short period. They're the long-term projects that you really need to invest in.
I think you've touched on this, Rob, but is there any clarity around the type of content that's most likely to feature on?
Yeah, I think to go back to that point about authenticity, I think the irony that the algorithms are now recognizing that it is easier than ever before for anyone and any brand to create content about a particular subject. As a result of that, I suppose the fight back is what the algorithms are now starting to sort of cite in their answers is proof points. So it could be case studies, it could be proprietary data, so data that your brand has that no other brand can offer. It could be testimonials from customers, reviews tend to
industry
be
reports. I see that, like Which reports.
Yeah, absolutely.
General roundups of 10 of the best.
Yeah, and one of the areas that I think is really interesting is that kind of user-generated content space where Reddit was getting all the headlines, I think, probably 6 to 9 months ago for how prominent a citation source it was. And it's a tricky one because it's a space I think brands have got to tread very carefully if they think they can get involved in those organic communities online.
Well, so you've got to be very transparent, haven't you?
Yeah,
you can't pretend.
If you want to go down that route. Yeah. But I think one of the other things that we've seen that you can do really effectively is use it as a source of insight. So look at what are your customers.
What people are actually asking, and you provide those answers.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be fed back into any sort of content framework to really aid that visibility. And that, again, that you are then able to answer genuine queries, genuine kind of knowledge gaps within your market as a brand, and sort of grow your visibility as a result of that.
I think there's a lot of concern about control of message. So is the answer that you're being given by Claude, ChatGPT, whatever, right? And what can marketers do to control that? Can they? It's a huge question.
There is an element of risk with the way these bots work, but I think what we've said earlier on the podcast as well still applies. So it's making sure that everything you put out there is consistent and accurate. So that's making sure that your pages are up to date or as much as they can be, not leaving information out there that could be parsed or inferred by these machines in an incorrect way. So I guess the consistency and relevance point and accuracy is really where you can keep as much control as you can, but there is an element of risk. So it's a wild west in some senses, but also there are moves you can make.
Yeah, it's also where the risk is around updating one channel and not the other. So I think we've, again, you see it all over LinkedIn at the moment, those kind of stories about brands. They might have updated the product category pages of their website, but content still exists out in the ecosystem, earned media sources, for example, that refer to an old product. Now, there's not, realistically, are we going to go out to press contacts and say, we need to take down that article that appeared 3, 4, 5 years ago? Probably not. But what you can do is sort of continue that cycle and make sure that you've got campaigns and you've got activity that really sort of shines the spotlight on those newer products in the same way your website does. So it all acts as one acts as an amplifier of the other.
Yeah. And to bring this back to earned media again, I think there's such a reputational question for clients as well, because one negative article could come back to haunt you. I'm seeing it for quite a long time to come on these sort of AI search models.
Yeah, I guess that just reinforces the idea that you need a good PR agency to begin with.
You do. I know one.
That's me too, actually. But I guess, the serious point is that those things will have a lasting effect, but there is as we say, a recency effect that can obviously tip the balance in some respects. And obviously that's just making sure that what you're putting out there is consistent, positive, and accurate to users' intentions. So there are things you can do, despite the fact that these negative stories can have an impact.
Well, protecting your reputation has always been really important, but perhaps more so than ever now.
And there's an episode about that you can go and watch.
Oh, there is, yes.
Crisis
Good plug.
management.
Good plug. I can't remember the number.
It's interesting though, because it's not just the story that the bot will see, I suppose, and understand, interpret, but also the response. So say a brand has had a crisis, the bot will be able to understand the steps that have been taken since in a way that maybe a casual reader of a newspaper hasn't. So if you've had a negative story, that's not to say you can't put steps in place after the fact to correct the course, because of the way these machines now read the internet. So yeah, it's not a lost cause.
Another excellent point. You're on fire today, Tom. An excellent guest indeed. So are brands optimizing for machines or humans when they're looking at their strategies?
I think ultimately, you see development of algorithms across numerous digital, platforms that we've worked across for years, LinkedIn, Meta, you name it. They've all the algorithms evolve and adapt based on what they know human beings want. And I think we're seeing that same thing happen in this space with GEO and AI search, where the very, very early adopters could probably gain traction through optimizing for machines. But I think then the machines change and they learn that people don't want to read sort of rubbish that's been churned out by AI to tick multiple boxes. They want to read unique content that is aimed at their area of interest, and that's not going to change.
It's funny, more things change, the more they stay the same in many respects.
Yeah.
So the challenges facing B2B businesses and consumer brands, same, different, overlap?
I think the challenge in terms of visibility, authority, relevance apply across both strands. But I think the bigger challenge for B2C is obviously that there's a greater surface area. There are more users and more engagers typically with a consumer brand than there would be with a B2B brand. So people will post reviews about products or a service or a brand, and that may have a more profound impact on the, way these machines interpret a company or a business. So that's probably the bigger challenge, I think, for consumer brands. But as I say,
yeah, I think that's right, isn't it? I think the sort of battleground where you can win and lose, I think, can differ between B2C brands and B2B brands. Whereas you might have a case study or a testimonial for a multi-million-pound piece of kit in a B2B market, that could be, you might need, that could be the equivalent of thousands of customer reviews for your product on, FIFO or an equivalent. I think it's factoring in kind of where your customers take their information, sources that they trust. I think that can vary across the two. But the broad principles, like you say, around, trust, third-party accreditation, Social proof as well, I think, is a big one. Is there evidence that people are actually using your product, enjoying your product, reacting positively to your product? There, that stands true across both segments, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting as well, because I kind of want to go track back on what I said initially, but there is also that social strategy element you really need to keep in mind for B2B brands, because LinkedIn, for instance, is such an important source of information for these bots. So what you're putting out there will obviously have a sort of very big impact on how these machines interpret your brand. And that's kind of the similar challenge, I suppose, for like consumer reviews in B2C. So I guess in some senses the challenge is actually quite even, but just different in nature, I suppose.
The more we talk about it, the more I just realise, or I think I realise it anyway, but just how huge a challenge this is for marketing teams. Do you think marketing teams are realising the scale of the challenges facing them and are being quick to embrace them, or are you seeing different pictures?
Very mixed, I would say. I think some are. I think some are, and some are quite daunted. And
I feel daunted just listening to it.
Yeah. I think others maybe buy into this idea that, well, GEO, it's not really any different to SEO. Do we need to overcomplicate it? I think, again, like with all of these things, there's a lot of nuance around it. There's a grey area somewhere in the middle of all this that we need to operate within. What I would say, advice to any sort of marketing team that is maybe scratching their heads a little bit about the challenge that they're facing, is bring your channel specialists together.
Well, this is going to lead on to my next question. There's always been, marketing teams always say it's really important that our agencies are integrated, they work really well together. But when GEO relies on the SEO teams, PR more and more, social content, how do you knit those specialist teams together really well to deliver this sort of harmonious result that...
From a practical standpoint, I would say, and again, you might say, well, you would say this, wouldn't you? The more of those channels you can bring under one roof, within one team, I think that consistency of message that Tom mentioned earlier, it's a lot easier to deploy when you've got the same team or the same network of people all working towards that same goal. So I think that's one thing I would say is sort of minimizing any friction between teams is really, really important.
Yeah, I think the integrated aspect, sometimes people have worked integrated in name, but maybe not in spirit. And I think that's probably where it might need to change. We need to actually
there's no hiding from it now. You've got to do it, haven't you?
Yeah, there's not, some people that maybe would have been able to get away working in a more of a silo, I suppose, might not be able to do that now.
And I think, even if you're an agency partner that's providing just one service, I think there's an obligation to say to a client, this is the idea, this is how it would work on earned media, but this is how it could also impact the other channels. It might not be us as executing it, but this is what that investment could deliver if all the teams work seamlessly together.
Exactly. We're all ultimately, we're all here, or we should all be here, to prove demonstrable impact on a business's bottom line, however that could look. And I think it's in everyone's best interest, whether you're responsible for social or not. If you've got a campaign that is being deployed on one channel, giving some thought to whether and how that can be deployed across another to get that message across to the same audience is more. It's always been important, but I think it's potentially more important now than ever before.
And as you said earlier, it's not just about the getting the same message out. It's getting out in a timely fashion, in a unified fashion, same spokesperson, etc.
Consistency, and I guess the strategy aspect of things is more important than ever now, just simply because obviously everyone needs to be sort of singing the same tune, really. So if you don't have a clear direction of where you're going, it will be very difficult to sort of put the foundations in place for visibility, I suppose, and obviously making sure that you're having it's lasting success, I guess, really.
So if you have a client that comes to you and says, obviously, we're aware the way that people are discovering our brand is changing. We haven't invested anything to date in GEO. Where do we begin? And that is a big question, isn't it? But where should they begin?
It's quite comforting in some respects, because a lot of people are at a very early stage. Even I would say the more sort of mature adopters or people that are playing in this space at the moment are still at a very early stage. I think it is a sort of rapidly moving picture. So I guess the first thing I would say is don't worry too much, but on the other hand, make sure that you're obviously working with people, that have access to tools that can sort of determine visibility and performance from a benchmark, and then obviously have an understanding of how all those pieces fit together to sort of improve visibility long term.
I think we've invested in a really sophisticated platform that can do a lot of this stuff, that can basically shed some light on where you might want to start or how your competitors are faring compared to you. I think the other thing to bear in mind is, don't necessarily see this as a sort of monumental task that is going to take you years to overcome. We try and break it down into bite-sized chunks, look at one product category initially, or look at one market initially. How can we sort of make traction and make gains in that area? And then once we've sort of started that ball rolling, there's potential then to expand out into other areas.
Yeah, owning the conversation doesn't necessarily mean owning every conversation. You can start from a sort of quite singular point and spread outwards that way. Much in the same way SEO works, really. You don't have to start from the ground up.
So if brands haven't got a limitless budget, as most don't, where should they start? Where would you say the biggest investment should be?
Well, it's a visibility challenge in essence. So the starting point really should be a benchmark, understanding what your position is to begin with, I suppose, and obviously having access to a platform or an agency partner that actually can do that for you, because obviously you can't rank,
you can't
measure.
Just sit there asking ChatGPT questions all day to see how many you appear in the answer.
Precisely,
you could, but
I mean that is part of the process.
Time.
Obviously, you would like to see that more over time, but obviously that's a very one-ended picture of the search process, and obviously that's one platform as well, so you need a more holistic view.
I think it's really important that brands invest in that insight up front, understanding who it is that they're trying to reach, and get their message in front of. What are they interested in? Where do they hang out? Which are their platforms of choice? Which platforms do they trust? And I think really from that, it in a sense, whether you're a marketing team of 3 or you've got a network of 10 agencies working for your marketing department, you then know that the areas
you're going to invest in the right places.
Exactly.
Because I know certainly you've pulled a lot of data from me on clients, and it is fascinating. You can just find out how many AI searches you're appearing in, how that compares to the competition. And look at individual parts of the business, and so that's going to be our priority. Like you say, break it down.
Not just the initial search as well, but where that search ends up is quite an important feature, I guess, for like thinking with my content hat on here, the strategy. So where are those initial searches ending up? Because we know from the way we all use these bots that you don't just start and end with one search. You usually do a follow up, and it's obviously making sure that you've got content that's addressing those follow up intentions, I suppose.
Yeah. I've got a really random question. When you ask, Copilot or GPT a question, do you put please? Because I just can't seem to stop myself doing it.
I do as well.
I was raised right. Else does this.
One of the very early webinars I sat on, there was a really good speaker who made the point that she seemed to be getting better results by using good manners. So,
I knew there was a reason I didn't. I'm just
don't know if that's still the case anymore. We're all very polite people, aren't we? So I think, it's just the thing to do. But there was a suggestion. I don't know if it's true anymore. But I can't train myself out of doing it now.
Well, I'm just thinking I'm playing it safe, and when the machines come for us all, I might be put aside as one of the more polite ones. So.
I love this because I've learned that not only am I not on my own in this behaviour, but actually I'm right too.
Yes.
So last question, a huge one. What are your predictions for where GEO is going to go?
I think it will only increase in importance simply because these machines are integrated, as Rob mentioned earlier, into almost every product we use now. And whether or not that's a good thing or not, it's a fact of life. And that is obviously clearly going to have an impact on the success of brands and their visibility in these platforms. So it's going to be bigger probably in the coming years, is my prediction.
Yeah, I think we're going to see more varied use of these platforms as well. So I think this isn't new, but I think we're going to see an increased dominance of voice search as well. So we're all very used to typing things into our phones on ChatGPT. I think people using them as literal sort of conversation partners, if you like. I think that's going to happen more and more, and I think with that will become the conversational nature of search will completely skyrocket as a result of that.
But we'll still say please and thank you.
Absolutely, we'll still say please and thank you for the reasons Tom said before.
And do you think the different platforms will find their own niches, or?
Yeah, I think quite possibly. I think ultimately, we shouldn't forget that these platforms are commercial entities, so they all want they probably all want ad revenue ultimately, but they all want a point of difference, a USP. So I think we will probably continue to see specialist areas, sort of, whether, what that looks like. I wouldn't want to speculate.
Will it help to refine investment? So you could, for example, for B2B brands, co-pilots where it's at, for consumer brands, it could be something different, but it would perhaps help.
Some models do appear to be more effective at certain tasks than others. So obviously it's just making sure that if you're, say, a data heavy business, you're choosing to target or create content for that platform so that it matches up well.
Something that I don't think is talked about enough is actually quite a skill to getting the information out of those platforms in the style that you want it. Yeah. I'll use it for
prompt engineering.
Well, I'll use it for image mock-ups for a picture. We want to visualize something that doesn't exist. So and it can take 4 or 5 attempts. I think I need to work on this as well as.
Yeah, but it's an interesting point though, because I think that's where I think we were probably all guilty of when AI search first became a thing. You'd almost type a one-liner into it and go and expect the answer to be perfect. And it's just not the case. But I think people are getting wise to that now, and that's affecting behaviours massively, which is why you're now seeing massive spike in the number of search prompts and search queries people are using to get their answer, and the nature of search queries becoming much more long tail because people are feeding in multiple sentences as a search query now because they know they need to do that to get that really specific information out of the platform.
Yeah, well, we're all learning, as we have throughout this podcast, which I think has been truly fascinating. So thank you both very much for your time.
No problem at all. It's been great.
Thank you.